And hi, we're back with Harrowings Live. This is Hal Gill, and I've got Jennifer Haddock with me. She's the everyday behaviorist, and we're going to hear a little bit about what all that means. She just
Mm,
asked me how I choose my guests, and I just look for people who are interesting and then ask them. And if they do show up, great. Sometimes I'm interviewing friends, sometimes, like recently I had David Gantz on. I think one of my very earliest one was with my vocal coach, Sunny Triple, and she's a fairly well-known singer in this area, at
mm.
the DC metro area. And then I had Lisa Law on, and Lisa, interesting character to tell a little bit about that. She wrote this book some time ago, Flashing on the 60s,
Alex?
about her experience taking photographs of all kinds of people that she knew well as she
Mm,
was growing up. And there's a picture of Bonnie Beecher. Later, Jahanara Romney is her name now. But this young lady was running the free kitchens at Woodstock, and Lisa was responsible for getting the food for the free kitchens at
mhm.
Woodstock. So she's been an interesting guest. She's in her 80s now and still very active. Had Sophie Burnham on a few minutes ago. Once I get the recording down and I can load that up into Substack, I had to do that one over Zoom. I've got some others coming up like that. But Jennifer, you are the everyday behaviorist, and I wanted to hear more about your Substack and what you're doing. So let me shut up and let you talk.
Well, thank you. I'm so honored to be on with all these great people. I don't know if I'm as interesting as those people, but thank you for thinking I am. Okay, so where to start? Let's see. I've spent the past 20 something years working in a field called applied behavior analysis or behavior analysis more broadly. Um, and let's see, I went through a period of clinical work with that, working largely with autistic populations and developmental disabilities, and really saw how well behavior analysis as a science, with the underlying philosophy of radical behaviorism, which is what I write a lot about, uh,
Uh-huh.
and when applied, can help people in tremendous ways. And so over the course of those 20 years, I had a lot of harrowing experiences myself. We can
Hey.
get into those later. Um, I was a I eventually went to grad school, got my master's in California. I decided to get a PhD in Florida, studied with someone who's pretty prominent in my field, and then did a postdoc at Kennedy Krieger, which is uh, part of Johns Hopkins. And then I was a professor for a couple years, and then my dad got sick and my life kinda just everything kinda caught up at once. I had to make this decision of come home and help out family duty, um, or say, "No, I'm not gonna help. I'm gonna take this new job in Florida that I actually really wanted." And so I ended up coming home to help, and that was probably my biggest harrowing experience because it was shattering of identity and loss of all this future that I had envisioned in my head. But it also kind of coincided with the dark night of the soul. I've been calling it depression. And so I found writing as a way in the past 4 years. I started a daily writing practice just to kind of get some things out that I had been feeling
Yes.
and um and I also concurrently with that had been going to therapy and trying traditional approaches to help myself. But at some point I realized you believe in this philosophy of life, radical behaviorism. Why don't you start applying it to yourself? And so I started doing that, and I was writing about it and how it kind of shows up, not in the clinical ways of traditional application, but just kind of like how do we incorporate this philosophy in our life? Um, and I guess I should back up and say that in the past 20 years, concurrent with my academic experience, I also was a yogi and did some yoga teacher trainings and meditation trainings. And so I've been incorporating that into my writing too, and just trying to just disseminate or talk about behaviorism in ways that maybe people haven't encountered it. There's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings out there. And so I just kind of want to provide a human feel to behaviorism in this field and introduce people to something maybe they haven't heard of before, or if they do hear of it, it might be in a disparaging way. And I just kind of want to provide some humanity behind it, and say, hey, like these are the kind of underlying assumptions, and this is how it looks like if it's applied to your life kind of broadly and generally. And I do that through various types of writing. Um, I just told you 5 minutes ago I can't talk about myself that long, but I've been.
You did great. No, that's fantastic.
And so, yeah, I have various types of writing on Substack, and the goal is just to kind of soften behaviorism, show people more of the human side through my own life experiences.
How you define behaviorism off the top?
Oh gosh, it's a natural science approach to the study of why organisms do what they do. Um,
Organisms, so
or
not just us.
not just humans, right? Actually, behavior analysis started in experimental behavior analysis with rats and pigeons and um, organisms we think of as lesser than us, but it allowed them to discover some naturally occurring laws or processes or that affect what we do. And then it started getting generalized to clinical application in humans. And there's like different types of behaviorism kind of branched out in lots of different ways. Um,
Yeah, my
spe-
start there was with B.F. Skinner. Am I on
yes,
the right track?
yes, you're right on track with that. So, um, pre-B.F. Skinner, most people have heard of Pavlov, who actually wasn't a behaviorist. He was a physiologist and kind of
Hmm.
discovered respondent conditioning, the whole stimulus-stimulus pairing kind of thing. And then J.B. Watson was the next, like the first prominent behaviorist. And I feel like he kind of gave behaviorism a bad rap because he came out like pretty arrogant, like
It's
give
funny
me
how
a
scientists can
child and
do
I
that, right?
change them. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just and so that's when I think kind of the rest of psychology was like, ew, behaviorism, which is unfortunate. And then he got wrapped up in a scandal with his grad student, and his wife was prominent and kind of slandered him. And so it kind of gave people a bad taste of behaviorism to start with. Um,
Yes.
but that was like methodological behaviorism. He was very much like still in that um, stimulus stimulus pairing kind of thing. And people were like, well, that doesn't explain behavior. Like, we're doing all this other more complex stuff. And so Skinner came along, and a few years later, he wasn't all that influenced by Watson. He was more influenced by Thorndike and like lots of different philosophers at the time. And I don't know if anybody is a psych aficionado here, but Thorndike was, I don't know if he would have called himself a behaviorist, but he was an early behaviorist. He kind of came up with instrumental conditioning, which is what Skinner kind of latched onto operant conditioning, the idea that what we do is selected over time by the consequences of whatever happens after what we do. And so we're more likely to do those things in the future. So
Yep.
Skinner's
Run
approach.
from pain to pleasure.
Yeah, yeah. So Skinner's kind of interpretation of behaviorism is radical in that he kind of started with these basic assumptions, like let's assume that everything we're doing is lawful and orderly because we have to assume that if we're going to study it scientifically. Let's assume that inside the behavior we feel and experience inside ourselves isn't any different than the behavior that other people can see.
Mm.
And he's let's assume I have a list of the assumptions in one of my applications. Like let's assume it's all of the same stuff. Let's assume it's determined. Let's assume the simplest explanations fits. And the big one for Skinner was let's assume that science, that the value of science is to give us practical tools to improve our lives. And so he was kind of saying like we could come up with all these theories of why we do what we do and explain ourselves. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if it's not practical and you can't apply it, then it's not very helpful. And so that's what I really love about behaviorism is just that it's not just the theory, it's the theory with practical solutions that help you improve if you want to. um, Sorry, I kind of rambled on that one.
Well, no, that was great. It's very technical. Of course, I'm very interested in your journey to making the choice to go away from a gig in Florida that you had wanted to do
Yeah.
and making the choice to care for your ailing father instead. Did I get that straight?
Yes. Yeah.
And tell me a little bit more about what that position in Florida was, and then how things worked out with your father.
Yeah. So I had previously been at a school in Louisiana teaching there. I was an assistant professor, um, doing the whole tenure track thing. And it just wasn't a good fit for me. And it was pretty far from family in Louisiana. And so this other position came along and it was more of a fit. And I was super excited about it. And then, yeah, my dad was, he was pretty much on hospice. He had a major health event. I told that position, I told them in Florida, I said, "Hey, if you can save this for me, that'd be great. But if you can't, I understand." And they couldn't. So I moved back home and I took care of him and helped him through. And he got off hospice. And now he's made a
Oh,
full recovery.
wow. How about
Well,
that?
yeah, yeah. I won't get into his health
That's
details.
fine. Yeah.
He still needs help. So I'm here. But in doing all of that and letting go of that, identity for myself, it's been, yeah, quite a journey because I didn't really think I would be back in clinical work, which is what I found eventually. I did teach adjunct. I was an adjunct professor online for a few years, but, that, was part-time and, um, eventually it ended, and so I ended up back in clinical work, and so now I find myself doing things that I was doing 15 years ago and that I've taught people how to do, and it's just very different coming back to like my old self.
Out of academia and into the practical application of
Uh-huh.
behaviors.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Interesting.
And I've seen it. I think it's been really helpful for me because one of the reasons I went back to grad school and wanted to be a professor was because I had been in clinical practice for so long and I wanted to kind of get out of it. I want to go to academia because then I can kind of make a bigger impact. I can teach people and maybe fix some of these systemic problems that we have in the clinical application.
Mhm.
That was a lofty goal and naive of me. You can't really do that from academia. Um, so I don't know, like, coming back and to this clinical role has disillusioned me a little bit with some of the things I thought about my career path and some of the things I thought I had been doing before might not have been as valuable as I thought they were. um, and now being in this position, I feel like I appreciate very much more the differences between clinical practice and academia and the how those how those systems kind of operate on our behavior differently. Um, I don't know how to explain that better, so I'll just shut up.
When you're actually dealing with people in a clinical situation, what are the kinds of things we're talking about doing with them? And what are
Okay.
kinds of problems are we trying to address? Maybe
Okay.
getting a little more specific about how
Yeah.
it plays out.
Yeah. So behavior analysis can be applied to lots of different problems. It's like at an organizational level, we have organizational OBM, organizational behavior management, kind of subsect. We have applications with people with autism. We have applications with health related behavior,
Mhm.
uh, exercise fitness, like health coaches. We have like special education applications and things for teachers. So there's a lot of variety in the field and ways that people are and have been applying behavior analysis to improve lives. For me specifically, I have worked historically with people with autism and developmental disabilities. So the specific problems include teaching language, teaching self-care and independence,
I
self-advocacy.
see.
Now that when I was working with children, it was more like language development, teaching alternative responses to interacting with neurotypical humans, which is difficult.
Are there such things?
Yeah, are there such things? I don't know.
as neurotypical humans?
They say they are, but yeah, I think we're all we're all very different.
Yeah, my sister diagnosed with me with autism before the word was even frequently used.
Really?
Yeah, and we were students and
Yeah.
Catholic school back in the day. I think she
Yeah.
decided I was autistic. And nobody else ever mentioned it, but, she was pretty well convinced. But then again, my sister also was an only child.
Your sister's the only child.
Well, initially, and then 2.5 years later, I show up and
Um,
sort of screwed that up for her.
yeah. So,
Little prince
so some of
problem,
the
you know?
some of the challenges I work on with my adult clients now are they vary significantly because autism is a very wide spectrum.
It
Um,
is.
so for some people, we're working on like social skills and vocational skills and um, time management kind of things that are yeah, like those bigger sorts of like fit into society kinds of things, or how
Right?
can you navigate this in a way that is advocates for your disability, but also um, allows you to contact reinforcement. And then some of my clients on the other side of the spectrum were working on things like toileting, fecal smearing, severe aggression, self injury. Uh,
Wow,
yeah.
that's pretty intense.
Yeah. So it's a spectrum and there's a lot of different behaviors. And I find that it's not really what I do now is consulting, and it's not as much about changing the client's behavior as changing the behavior of everyone who interacts with them, getting them to,
Education, huh?
yeah, yeah, education, but also getting them to see how what they're doing and how they're playing into it is continuing that behavior and
Yeah.
how they might need to change some things because they are part of the environment and they're part of what's shaping this behavior, maintaining it. Sometimes they are, and so they have to change. A lot of times they change what they're doing. And that's actually the hardest part of my job is to get people to buy into, hey, do this differently. Trust me that it's going to work. It's not going to work immediately. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But if you hang in there, I think, we'll see some changes. So yeah, that's kind of the behavior I deal with. And mostly what I do is trying to get other people to change what they're doing. Yeah.
So how do you manage to maintain some degree of sanity in yourself in what must be incredibly frustrating interactions with others members of our species?
Yeah, that's a really good question. They're not always frustrating interactions. So one way that I keep some sanity is to focus on all the good ones. So, an example is just yesterday, I wrote this long report, part of my job to write a report about how the treatment plan, like how is everybody supposed to help this person, support this person. And the caregiver was so thankful. And I don't think I've ever been thanked for a written report like that. She's like, this is so detailed. This is such care to him. And he's never had anything like this. And so that really touched me, and so I hang on to those sorts of small wins. Another small win was getting a psychiatrist to reconsider the psychotropic medications that they were giving that haven't been helping. Um, and so that was another small win because
Oh,
they
yeah.
they were pretty adamant that they thought this person should be on this antipsychotic, and I was like, they don't show psychotic symptoms, and also and also the behavior you're trying to treat is still continuing, so maybe it's not working. So that
Yeah, that's a good call. I
um,
tell you, those medications are something else. I had the experience when I was about 20 of stopping drinking abruptly.
mm,
And, that can cause some serious sleep disturbances. And
mm,
I ended up paying enough attention to this to notice I was sleeping very little and attracted, and I was sleeping like in cat naps. I managed to sprinkle in about 30 hours of sleep over 30 days,
wow. Oh, wow.
which will put you in a different state of mind.
Yeah, for sure.
And I decided it was a good idea to try to throw a party down at the Kingsmill Marina near my neighborhood. And the Coast Guard Auxiliary had already booked the marina, and the James City County cops came and they put me in the maximum security ward of Eastern State Hospital for the
Mm.
weekend,
Oh my god.
Labor Day weekend of '83. And during that time, they didn't medicate me, but I was moved to a much nicer hospital where they did, and they decided I had all of the symptoms of bipolar disorder. And I did. It was a fair cop. When you don't sleep for 30 days, that'll happen.
Yeah.
And but it was detoxification from alcohol that my doctors later have identified, and it took 15 years before I stopped taking lithium.
Wow.
And but when I did, under the supervision of a doctor, I
Right.
do not want to give anybody the idea they should go off of medications they've been
Right.
prescribed,
Right.
but I never needed to be on them.
Mhm.
I probably needed to A, grow up, and B, take personal responsibility for my moods, which
Mhm.
I learned to do, as I do
Mhm.
still have a tendency to have the kind of highs and lows that go with being a primate in
Right.
this civilization.
Yes, exactly, yes.
And one of the things
Me
I've noticed is primate behavior, right,
Uh-huh.
amongst our particular species is
Uh-huh.
quite evident. You talked about fecal smearing, and the metaphorical equivalent is
Mhm.
on the press all the time, right? Um, so, yeah, there are a lot
Uh,
on the spectrum, right? And it seems that a lot of the people who manage to attain power, and I'm in DC where a lot of people have power, right? And I hang out with some people who have a lot. One of them is a psychiatrist who worked as a Navy captain and rose up to be the head of Bethesda Naval Hospital's psychiatric program. So he knows a little bit about what he's talking about, I think.
Mhm.
He's in his 80s now. And he has a little gathering. We call it Civilization Anonymous because we think civilization is trying to kill us. And how do we navigate that, as getting older? One of the things I was just on about with Sophie Burnham, who's the author of this book that just came out about what did she call it again? It's the first word is escaping me. The second word is happiness of being old.
Mhm.
And actually saying the word I am old is like anathema, right? But
Mhm.
just about all of us have to face it. And a lot of the people that we hang out with are very high achievers. One of them owns like multiple Ferraris for some reason, races them. It's like a national squash champion. And, he's driven, but a lot of it is out of some very severe trauma
Mm. Mhm.
is driving that behavior. Another one, ex-senator, um, now not in the area any longer, I don't believe. We were trying to get him back in the area, but I think he's out west. He had been a Rhodes Scholar like Clinton,
Mhm.
and instead of avoiding Vietnam, he volunteered. He
Mm.
could have stayed out, but he
Mhm.
volunteered to go. And he ended up being one of the people charged with counting the bodies. So you talk about deep trauma. And last time I ran into him, or one of the last times, it wasn't the last time, but one of the last times I ran into him in town, he was on his way over to the Metropolis Club where he was a member. And he was telling me he was on his way to India to wash the feet of lepers as part of he had gone over to being a Mormon because he had seen how much work the Mormons were doing for the Indians, the Native Americans out west. And he felt compelled to do it. It was never enough, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Never, he could not do enough service. For some reason, it was being driven to service in that way as an overcompensation. So
Mhm.
behaviorism, that
Mhm.
just sprang to mind as I was thinking about my friends around here and how they compensate for the kinds of dramatic kinds of, stress that people go in. And many of them, have also developed different problems in their lives that require medications or interventions, and,
Mhm.
it's hard to navigate being a human is, I
Mhm.
guess, my main point here, and
Yes.
I'll hand it back to you.
Well, I liked what you kind of brought up there and that you recognize that these past experiences affect our current behavior.
Mhm.
Because the major idea of behaviorism is that everything we're doing is a product of biology, learning history, and current circumstances, and cultural selection. That gets a little complicated, um, basically there are all these types of variables that exert their effects, but the ones we really have control over are the learning history and the current circumstances. And when it comes down to it, what we can only really actually control, because we can't change history, are those current circumstances. So if we want to change our behavior, we have to look at how those circumstances are playing into, why we're doing what we're doing. And I think it's easy to forget that learning history and current circumstances is really complicated. There's just a few words that describe an unfathomable amount of variables that exert their effects. And
Yes.
it's easy to get caught up and want to put it in a place and say, "Oh, that's their personality," or "Oh, that's their disorder," or "Oh, that's there's something inside them that's doing this." But it's from a radical behaviorist perspective, that's not we don't put the cause as inside the organism. The locus of control is outside us. And so looking outside us for reasons why we're doing what we're doing is kind of compassionate and hopeful, I find. Yeah.
I like that. I like the word compassion in particular because
Yeah,
I think we need to have a lot of compassion for ourselves, number one.
absolutely.
And then after that, we can extend that compassion to others and that helping others without expectation of any recompense for it. I think that's so key because a lot of our culture around here, anyway, is built on transactions. I
Right.
do this for you. I'm expecting something in return. I don't get that expectation realized. I'm going to be disappointed. And in
Could be.
disappointment, I might have a bad reaction to being disappointed. And
Mhm.
troubles just spill off of that.
Yeah.
And so that's the thought that came to me as you were talking.
Yeah. I find that people that is one thing that behaviorism does is by removing the control from inside sources like personality or defective character or whatever, or
Mhm.
disorder. It Yeah, by putting that control in the external environment and learning history, that it's just yeah, it is compassionate, and I feel like that's a big thing about behaviorism that people don't get or appreciate. So I'm glad that you did. And that's also how I stay sane, is kind of well, I've developed meditative practices, and I try to kinda drop into meditative moments whenever I can, even if it doesn't look like sitting down, closing my eyes, meditating. So I just kind of try to drop into those, and that's also how I handle stress, which you had asked about.
Mhm.
And one of the kind of meditations I do is to just if I'm stuck on a problem or blaming myself or something like I'm internalizing something, I sit and I think on how is my learning history and circumstances contributing to this? Like, and then once I start thinking on it, I'm like, oh, that thing happened, and that thing happened, and that thing happened, and so really, I'm an organism doing the only thing she could do. Yeah. So it's a little bit freeing, and in those kind of meditative practices and thinking about control outside yourself makes me feel sane. I still
Reminds
have
me of an old 80s song, The Fix. One thing leads to another.
yeah, one thing.
Do you remember that? Yeah, it's been coming back up for me recently as I watched the ping ponging of things. I was actually at a concert by The Who recently,
So fun.
um, and I had a front row seat for the Philadelphia show because it's the last one, right?
Wow.
It's 80 years old. Roger's 81. They're done.
Yeah, yeah.
But they went out on top with a good show. And I saw them in 2007 and thought that was the last time. But one of the songs he has there from Tommy, I don't know
Mhm.
if you know the rock opera.
I don't know that one, no.
No, it's called Pinball Wizard.
Oh, wizard.
Yeah, and the idea is like pinball, right?
Uh-huh.
The one thing leads to another. Things bounce off of each other.
Mm.
And Pete's actually channeling there his guru, Meher Baba, who was, by some people's accounts, including his own, the avatar of the age. And he's a and Pete's character in this is a deaf, dumb, and blind kid who's traumatized, right?
Uh-huh.
So actually, it's up your alley in some
Yeah.
ways because Tommy is traumatized by seeing his father murdered, and then his parents who murder his father, his stepfather and his mother tell him, "You didn't see it, you didn't hear it, you won't say nothing to no one, never tell a soul." And the kid becomes deaf, dumb, and blind at that moment.
Oh,
So you get the idea.
yeah.
But then he becomes this messianic figure because he's adept at pinball. With
Yeah.
being deaf, dumb, and blind, he can just play the heck out of a pinball game. And Elton John plays this competitor to him and is one of the most famous scenes in the movie.
Gotta
Version.
check.
It came out in like 1975, so I'm really dating myself here. But the point being about determinism, right? One thing leads to another. And if that's the case, if everything is cause and effect, then nothing that happens can't happen.
Right.
And everything that happens has to happen.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't know if that's true or not. Are you tuned into Richard Sapolsky then?
Oh, yes. I've encountered yes.
And he had a book called Determined, as I
He
recall.
does. He does. Yes, yes.
And what are your feelings about that? I wanna
I
get into your critique of Sapolsky now.
oh gosh. I should say off the top that I am not uh the one to come at him with a critical critique. Many of
Well,
my
positive critique, I'll take that.
Yeah, many in my field might. No, I think that his approach is from a neuroscience approach, and so
Mhm.
uh, his view of determinism is maybe slightly different than that of behavior analysis, in that he attributes most things to the brain. Everything comes back to the brain, which is accepted in our culture and generally kind of applauded and appreciated.
Where else did it come from?
The
Um,
environment. The external world, the brain in combination. The brain isn't, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, I would
very
say.
good.
And so it's inextricable from everything else in our experience.
Mhm.
Um, and so I did try to read that book and I got through quite a bit of it. I really appreciated actually at the end of Determined, there's a big appendix that gets into like, it's like um, neurology or 101. And I really appreciated that because that's something that I feel like behavior analysis in my training, I didn't get a lot of brain study. And I feel like if we could merge our disciplines a little bit more, we would be bigger and have a greater impact. Uh,
Yeah, good, good.
yeah. But, he doesn't, Sapolsky doesn't give a lot of credit to Skinner. He kinda dismisses Skinner and I don't know that he's read all that much of Skinner or understood Skinner, which is understandable because Skinner is hard to understand. But so that's my only gripe is that I'm reading, and I'm like, "But you're not the originator of this idea. Skinner wrote about this for decades and decades." And, it
But
just
he's
feels
repackaged it, right?
intellectually disingenuous.
I
Uh,
see.
so, that was my kinda critical gripe, but I do appreciate that, he's putting this view out there and it gives us opportunity to collaborate and connect on that, so, yeah.
Yeah, I found determinism to be quite a trap,
Yeah.
intellectually speaking,
Yeah.
because it's hard to get outside of it, right?
Mhm.
T
Mhm.
It bothers me a bit, but
Mhm.
I can also see it and think that, if I reject it, well, of course I reject it, I have to, I have no choice. It's determined.
The ultimate irony.
Can't get out of it. So,
The
I
only
don't know.
thing you could
I
do given everything.
I step
Uh,
outside of all of it and say, "I don't know, I just know how it seems to me, and I could be wrong." That's one of my
right,
mantras.
right. And I feel like Skinner's version of determinism wasn't like, um, this is the only outcome. It's just that we'll never know all these variables exerting their effects. So we have to make this as
Right.
things are lawful and orderly, or we're not going to get anywhere as a science. Otherwise, we're just making stuff up. And that's just not science.
If
So,
you could know all the variables, you'd be able to predict absolutely everything, and I think that's what
right.
a lot of our AI folks are after.
Mm,
is the
mhm.
ability to know everything, and also our surveillance state, for that matter,
Right, right.
to be able to gather as much data as possible. One of the things I hit upon recently, where was I? I go too many places and I see too many things.
No such
But it was about how the stock market is doing fantastic. I was at an Aspire tour thing. It was one of these things where they're trying to get entrepreneurs all fired up about, you know, making sure they create as much wealth as they possibly can so they can help other people,
yeah.
and help themselves first and foremost, but, also generate generational wealth and,
Mhm,
continue to be able to pass it on into the future. I like some of these ideas, but I also see the avarice in it, and I saw also the greed, and I was kind of like, but it's talking about the stock market doing well now, and it's because of the data.
mm,
We're getting lots of data, and the pandemic was instrumental in that because we were all suddenly direct to consumer.
mhm,
We're not going to the store. We didn't
mm,
need to worry about the brick and mortar. We just got everything delivered to us, and they got all our data. They
mhm,
know where we are, what we're buying, why we're buying it. They build relationships with us. Customer relationship management comes in. Behaviorism, right?
mhm, yeah.
They are using that data to then,
Predict and control.
yeah, suddenly feel like a lab rat.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about, like, how fast AI is progressing, I could imagine a world where technology could somehow absorb and categorize all of well, many more variables than we consider throughout our lives and summarize how they accumulate and help us better predict and control behavior. That was something Skinner said a lot. The goal of science is prediction and control, and I think
Yeah,
that
control. I don't want to be
controller
controlled.
is a bad word, like, it's so aversive. But I don't think it was control in a, like, puppeteering kind of way. It's more like, uh, let's be able to change things. Give us a little bit of autonomy in this, rather than just treating events as if they're free will, willy-nilly coming from somewhere mystical. I think that's what he yeah, that's how I interpret the control part. And the prediction, obviously, you can't make 100% accurate predictions about what someone's going to do. You don't have access to all that information. Um, and there's someone in my field, Tony Nevin, I'm sorry, not Tony Nevin, Alan Nuringer talks about the stochasticity of our responding. So a little bit, not anti determinism, but saying that, "Hey, maybe there's more to this. Maybe things aren't as determined. Maybe it's more, stochastic, like popcorny. Maybe it's not as predictable as, we'd like to think." So, I don't know.
I'd love it not to be predictable, but I have a feeling it is.
Oh,
I
a
have that sense, right?
a lot of times, yeah.
But I do like the idea of being random and sort of unpredictable myself,
Right.
and
Uh-huh.
it doing what's unexpected, and
Mhm.
then seeing what kind of effects that has, the
Mhm.
ripple effects that it can have.
Yeah.
And I get that from a lot of different sources. You were asking my background before, and my degrees are in German literature. I think I was attracted to it largely because they needed to borrow the English term happy ending
Huh.
from English because it doesn't really happen in German.
Interesting. Wow. That says a lot about the culture.
It does, right? There are a lot of things about German culture that sort of opened up my mind, and if a lot of them are my own opinions and are not necessarily shared by anybody. But there's the term natürlich, which means naturally or of course.
Uh-huh.
And if translated into English, the German accent will say it with this sort of bend on the end of it phonetically. Of course, like
Mhm.
natürlich comes up, and it almost sounds like an implied "you jerk" after it. And I think that could explain a lot of, international relations with Germans in
Mm.
the past, but I'm not positive if that's true. I've spent some time in Denmark as well and noticed the culture there is quite different than ours. I like it in a lot of ways, but it was also frustrating because they have this thing called Jantelov,
Mhm.
and it's old. You know about that? You know
No,
about Danish
I'm
culture at all?
nodding.
Jante law basically says that everybody is equal. Nobody is better than anybody else. They basically went right from serfdom to socialism without any breaks in between. So everybody's equal, everybody is fine, everybody is not to get ahead of anybody else. The more you feel that everybody is equal and nobody's better than anybody else, the better you are than everyone else.
Mhm.
It's sort of a twist to it, a little inward spin on that that's sort of ironic, and they're aware of it, and they're aware of how it's culturally sort of permeated throughout their society. And everyone agrees it's kind of a bad thing, but they all participate in it. And it's also an interesting culture in the aspect that you've only got about, well, when I lived there, I think the population was 5 million. Maybe it's about 7 or 8 million now. I have no idea. But it was more like a club than it was a country because it's so small. And if they were very much a melting pot like we are, as an expat, I went over there expecting to be sort of like just absorbed into it.
Mhm.
I found out that the idea, you may have heard of hygge. It's a
Mhm.
Danish cultural thing about being cozy with each other. That's like ironclad, and only Danes have it.
Oh.
It felt like there's a certain degree of xenophobia,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
and I guess that's natural because if they didn't have it, they would cease to exist. They would simply be absorbed into every other culture that came along,
Mhm.
and kind of like in America, where we take in people and hopefully we accept them and they become just other Americans, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
After a generation or so, certainly.
Mhm.
Um, Although I see there's some backlash against that these days in our politics. I talked a little bit about politics with Sophie, and I always get myself into a state of like, people have the power. She's like, no, we're powerless. We're in the midst of this kind of behavioral kind of thing and this machinery of the economy. I'm like, every cent we spend is a vote for the
Mhm.
kind of world we are co-creating.
Exactly.
And I haven't been able to get that, I think, amplified enough.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of my idea behind doing this Substack stuff is amplification of signals through the noise. See, your voice is getting amplified.
Thank you for that.
And I want to go turn it back to Substack a bit and your use of that,
Okay.
unless you wanted to go
Well,
somewhere else with it
I did
first.
have a little,
Please.
aside. So one thing that's I really love about behavior analysis and internet selection applying at not only the species level, like natural, but selection by consequences in our lifetime
Hmm.
at individual level, but also at a cultural level. So you can use that same framework to see how cultures behave and why they behave. And so, like you mentioned with the Danes and the xenophobia, that's probably like a survival contingency, right? Like their their culture won't survive unless.
That's my point. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then what's happening here with the current political environment, I've seen some people kind of compare it to an extinction burst. So, like all the big sort of liberal kind of pushes kind of started enraging people, and then, or a subset of people, and then now they're having this. And they were no longer kind of getting their way. And so now that the reinforcer or pre-Trump reinforcers kind of cut off for them, things are changing. Now there's this outrage, which is what happens. Like when we are used to getting certain reinforcers, used to responses producing certain things, and those contingencies change, then across species we see effect. We call that extinction when the reinforcer no longer comes contingent on responding. And so we see predictable kinds of responding, anger, emotional responses, variability in responses, kind of doubling down on your choice. And so I see that culturally, kind of at a bigger level, like what's happening as a reaction, as a sort of extinction burst, or this like just inevitable result of that push pull. Uh, Changes in reinforcement contingencies. I don't know. I kind of lost the plot on that sentence, but
No, I like it. I think, the reactions, I don't know, but could you define extinction burst a little bit more?
Yeah, okay, so at a very,
Layman's terms.
very simple level, think
Mhm.
about, like, a rat pushing a lever or even a human at a vending machine. This is a really simplified example. You're pushing it, you're used to getting that pellet or that food product. It
Right.
doesn't what do you do next? You push harder. You might start to get angry. You might cuss out the machine, or the rat is going to press, the lever a bunch more times. Eventually, you'll give up, but in the meantime, there will be emotional responding and sort of
Okay.
a
So,
backlash.
but what's going to happen is at the end of that, give up.
Yeah, yeah. Behavior will
And
change. Ascend and if there's an alternative response to engage in, like something that's also going to produce that reinforcement, then you'll see behavior shift towards that. So if there's a vending machine right beside it, you might try that one instead.
got it.
Or yeah, the rat has other levers; they might go press that. So um, at a kind of cultural level, there have to be alternative responses for people to engage in, or the
Right.
backlash kind of continue. It'll just that rage will continue, and I don't see any of those alternative sources at the moment. uh,
Well, I'm hoping that we can actually get people to be inspired, right? And actually have that, the opposition in the campaign was talking about joy, right?
mhm,
That
mm,
was the big, I was like, I'm down with that. I like joy.
yeah, I like
But I
joy.
wasn't getting a whole lot of substance beyond that, which I
Yeah,
saw as a problem. And I think we all see it as a problem now.
right.
I want to see that joy though part come in there so people are excited about their lives that they want to life loves the liver of it is a idea I came up with this morning and sort of emerged out of the pleroma as it will.
Love that.
Um
He loves the liver of it.
yeah, it does. So if we get out there with some enthusiasm, I think that some things could change provided we can get that enthusiasm to catch.
Right.
The thing is, it doesn't catch in the halls of power necessarily, but the halls of power are only there because of the collective actions of all of us. We
Yeah.
all have a role to play. We
Right.
all, and I am being told by others, "Oh, well, we don't have any power."
Mm,
Well, you have the power to run your lungs, right? You have whatever, and I go to really concrete things like solar power
mhm,
comes down into the plants photosynthesis, and whether you're a mediator or not, eventually it's coming from the sun. You've got the power.
mhm.
That's the sun, and you have a radiant sun within you, like Albert Camus talks about. I don't know. Do you know Camus?
No, just not.
Okay, Albert Camus said, in the depths of winter, I found that within me I had invincible summer, or something like that.
Uh-huh.
I probably misquoted him, but he's a writer in France. Died in a car accident very tragically. But anyhow, he wrote a couple of good books. One of them is called The Myth of Sisyphus
Oh, okay. Maybe
and rolling the stone up the hill, right? And then
that.
it rolls back down. You got to roll it back up again. And that's sort of where a lot of people feel they are. I mean, my wife definitely is a human resources manager over at the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. It's day to day. Another person's being onboarded, another person leaving. It's just rolling that ball up the hill and then having it roll back down again
Yeah.
and roll it back up the hill. And she's like, "What is the point?" That was
Mhm,
one of my essays recently. What is the point?
mhm.
So my Substack has some problems in the aspect of I don't really know. The point is, I drafted another Substacker, Charlotte Del Signore. I don't know if you've run across her yet.
I
She's got a
haven't.
thing called Career Punks,
Uh-huh.
and I've decided to hire her as a coach.
Oh,
So,
yes, I did come across her from your link. Yeah.
oh, thanks.
Yeah.
And so I've amplified her signal, and it's a ping, ping, ping like a pinball, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, how are you using your Substack, and how's the traction? What's going on?
Oh, that's very good question. I feel like I'm confusing people with my Substack.
Me too. Join the club.
Yeah, I constantly thank those who stick around because I'm like, "Oh gosh, you're on a wild ride. Thank you so much." Um, so I started my Substack. uh, Okay, let me back up. So I started this daily writing practice a few years ago, and I was just
Right.
writing. on Facebook for my friends, and I amassed almost 1,000 followers that way, which surprised me because behaviorism is not exactly popular. But so I was really grateful for them. But at some point, I was like, okay, I'm writing like fiction that I don't want stolen, or I'm writing fiction that I might want different eyes on, people to actually help me because I don't know anything about publishing unless it's an academic publication. One of my colleagues kind of steered me to Substack, and I started by putting a fiction book that I am working on, which is currently on the back burner. So that's how my Substack started. And then I was like, why don't I move more of my writing to Substack? And so I have multiple writing projects, like many writers. I feel like I'm just always adding a new one. So I've got that fiction book that I occasionally post. Sometimes I am working on a memoir, and so occasionally post chapters that I'm testing my comfort level and sharing that information. Um, and choosing which chapters has been kind of difficult.
Right.
Uh, and then sometimes I just want to write something new because I like to wake up in the morning and just write. And so I write whatever I feel inspired to write. And so sometimes it's really weird. My last post for Everyday Behaviorist was called Big Feel Belly, which was inspired around a campfire, and I had a psychedelic and I had this like great idea. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to put it on page, and it didn't turn out as I thought. But so
That's always the way, isn't it? I start writing, I never know where I'm going. And
yeah,
then I have to look at the title and say, "What was my title again?
yeah.
What was I on about?" Okay.
And then I have a couple essays that I wanted to turn into children's books, and so I kind of have that on the side. And then I um I decided that maybe since people were like, "Well, how is this behaviorism, Jennifer? This is really weird. Like, what are you even talking about?" I started a publication called Behavior Curious, which is like more technical kind of, but in lay terms. Like I want to make it very lay friendly.
Yeah.
But like, hey, this is what radical behaviorism is about. Just kind of that more uh, just that nonfiction kind of style that's not really creative writing.
Mhm.
And so I have that one going on, and then I have another publication called Operant Spirituality, where I am writing kind of just my spiritual musings. I'm not sure where that one is going. I just sometimes, like I said, I like to incorporate Eastern spirituality. There's a lot of similarities between Eastern spirituality and behaviorism, and I think those are the kinds of things that are applicable to people like outside of clinical settings. Uh,
Okay. Let's get more specific. Which Eastern philosophies are you into?
Ooh. Well, I'm very interested in Vedanta, and for about a year and some months now, I've been very, very interested in Sri Ramana Maharshi. And
Okay.
so, and kind of absorbed in his teachings. It's very eclectic, the things I read. So I'm not an expert, but I like to tie like how is this related to behaviorism? Like what's our similarity here? Um, and also, I'm interested in Zen and Zen variations. I tend to like uh, the Hindu inspired approaches because that was my background with yoga. And I feel it's a little more warm to me for some reason. Like, I don't know, it feels more like I'm getting hugged. When I read Zen, it's like, ah. but but Vedanta's more like, oh, hug. and
Not
so
good.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
yeah, those are what I'm into, and like I said, I'm not an expert in that stuff. I've
I'm
taken
a dabbler myself in many things.
yeah,
Are you
I've,
familiar with this one by any chance?
yes, yes. Last
What
year when
book?
yes, one of my mentors introduced me to Alan Watts, and I was like, how have I not heard of Alan Watts before? Just
I
like
love this one because it's titled On the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are.
yes,
And
yes,
who are you? Well, you're just, as Alan Watts would tell you, you're just the jolly old ancient of days, masquerading as you.
yeah,
I have another guru I like to use quite a bit. Let's see, his book, and I've got it here. I can't see if it's up there.
yeah.
Yeah,
I haven't
it's
seen
sort of blurry right now, right there, holding it steady.
yeah,
Um, I love how Substack is very choppy with its video, but this is called Something Good for a Change.
Something good for a change. I'm gonna
and
write.
it's Random Notes on Peace Through Living. It's termed Weird and Wonderful by the New York Times, and A Master Satirist by Tom Wolfe.
Okay.
It's a quote there on it. The Rolling Stone says, a poet, a teacher, and brain damaged children, an improvisational acting coach in Hollywood studios, a close friend of Lenny Bruce, and one of Kesey's merry pranksters, everything in his background has fit him to be the hog farm's chief tongue dancer. Temporarily a martyr, he has heretofore had a successful career as a saint. That's from the Rolling Stone. Wavy Gravy is the author, and his original name was Hugh Romney. So I'm a follower of his. 89 years old, still at it. He has a thing called Camp Winter Rainbow, celebrating 50 years.
Uh-huh.
Try to send a kid to camp every year because I don't have kids of my own. So I want to be a good ancestor.
Uh-huh.
And I also, have dug into a lot of other of those of the general hippie background, which, Watts was peripheral to them.
Uh-huh.
Joseph Campbell was. I was talking to David Gantz 2 Tuesdays ago. He's just starting a Stanford course called Dead Reckoning about the Grateful Dead in history, art, and business, commerce. And, these undercurrents of society, these countercultural movements, I think have a lot to say for the world and a lot that could actually help save it.
Mhm.
As we've always seen that promise back in
Mhm.
the '60s, that ethos, and there's some people who've been carrying through ever since.
Mhm.
Not a lot. A lot of us also have been, lured away to Silicon Valley.
Mhm.
But as a result, you have things like I was talking about eyesight to the blind, I think, at one point. Maybe I was talking to Sophie about that, I forget. But yeah, that's right, I was.
Yeah.
The idea was that Steve Jobs decided after they eradicated smallpox,
Mhm.
like in India, where Vedanta is very big, to link it back, what were they going to approach next? Well, Wavy and his best friend, Larry Brilliant, who was one of the epidemiologists who helped eradicate smallpox, a
Mhm.
UN doctor, they decided to get on buses after Woodstock gave them a lot of good press as they were the security for Woodstock.
Mhm.
They called themselves the Please Force, like, please don't do this, please do this instead. Um, they would move, and that's behaviorism right there, right?
Mhm.
They would move these buses into London. They raised some money there and then headed across Europe to drive to Bangladesh to feed the starving masses in 1970. They had the monsoons that were
Mhm.
ravaging
Mhm.
Bangladesh. They didn't make it. The war broke out first, but they went up into Nepal and they noticed unnecessary blindness was rife. And a $50 operation could restore a person's sight. And a person in the third world is blind. It's a great burden on the society, right? They don't have to be blind. Um, so Steve Jobs got them together to find out what they were going to tackle next, and it ended up being unnecessary blindness. And seva, which is Sanskrit for service,
Mhm.
comes from that.
Mhm.
We have run one thing to the next, and we're
Yeah.
rapidly running out of time, but we should come back together at some point.
I would absolutely love that. This was such a fun conversation.
I would love to talk more about the Eastern stuff too, because I think all of us need a type of rebirth of sorts from our American consumerist culture to start thinking more logically, more locally, and being the change we want to see in the world, as Mahatma Gandhi put it,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my main mantra. That's what I'm trying to amplify through cyberspace to the best of my ability. I need all the help I can get, so happy to have enlisted you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll definitely help you amplify.
I'll sign you up. And this was so much fun because I'm learning so much too. You have a good education behind you, and you've a world of service going on in your work as well.
Yeah, thank you. I try to practice the Dharma, the service, and they say that that is the path to self actualization. So, yeah. I don't know. I try.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's okay not to know for sure.
Yeah.
I have a sense of it though. I know how it seems to me, and I'm happy to share my perspectives and then have my perspectives corrected.
Yeah, me too.
Because
Me too.
that's one of the things that happens between people. That doesn't happen if we're not talking to each other. If I'm just talking to myself or talking to my AI companion, sometimes I do that.
Uh,
But that's like
an
an
echo chamber.
it's an extension of my brain. It's a
Uh-huh.
great research assistant in
Mhm.
some ways. Sometimes it's a bad research assistant.
Mhm.
I can catch it in mistakes pretty quickly.
Oh,
I
yeah. Yeah.
can't
Well,
believe how much stuff it makes up.
I've actually been pretty resistant to using AI. I've only recently kind of started dabbling more and
Me too.
been blown away by its capabilities, but also definitely see those limitations. And one of them being just like that constant, like, oh, yeah, that's great. Oh, yeah, that's great. Oh, this is beautiful. And I'm like, oh, it's not very helpful feedback. Like, not everything I do is great.
Precisely. And this is something that I've seen a lot of people being lured into.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
And you can't tell them otherwise. It's rude for one thing, and it's perplexing to me, but there are evidence and it's piling up. And I have my little tendrils into becoming an AI consultant through this called the US Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights, which has not been shut down.
Not yet. Not yet.
Yeah. I mean, everything else around here, the Smithsonian Institution, all the museums on the mall, closed.
Oh, it's tragic.
I know. I like to go there.
I love museums. Yeah. What is going on?
Well, I think what we've got is a governmental impasse and some behaviorism is on display.
Yeah. Yeah. I often wish that um, behaviorism or just some of these core concepts were taught early on in our education, so that we could, I don't know, think differently before we get so trapped in um, all these like traditional kinds of narratives about why we do what we do, or I don't know. That was just a little aside that I had there. Like, I wish we all learned about it early on. uh, yeah.
Yeah, I wish we all had better educations than we've had. I know that it's been going downhill for a long time in a lot of ways, and it's scary. And it's also gotten much more expensive as time
Yeah.
goes on. Have been doing some experiments with that. I did notice one comment I wanted to reflect on, and I've got about 2 minutes here. Perpetual curiosity is imperative to our behavior growth, to AI or not to AI. Terry Twitchell has said. So, acknowledging you, Terry, thank you for joining. I thank everyone who's joined. We've had, looks like 18 others besides us.
Yay.
Now that we're finally on, and my initial attempt, it just refused to connect. So, this one is not titled, I don't think. Like, it's probably just as live with Hal Gill and Jennifer and Haddock, but we'll put it out there. It'll go out on YouTube. It'll go out on Spotify automatically, and clips will be made from our conversation as well. So we'll see what that ends up being, and hopefully you'll get some.
Perfect.
And feel free to amplify the signal through the noise.
I definitely will. Thank you so much for this opportunity. This was just such a pleasure.
Well, I really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed just about every conversation I've had so far. Just about.
Just about.
Occasionally you'll let a clinker, but I can usually make something up out of something.
Yeah. I'm glad I wasn't one of those. So
No,
good.
not at all. I mean, it's amazing how much service there is involved in helping people navigate the neurodivergence
Hmm.
that's neat. I can't imagine how this was for people 50 years ago,
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
existed 50 years ago, but people were not getting the kind of treatment and care that you're talking about providing.
Absolutely. And that's one of my bigger
Absolutely.
is because a lot of people, caregivers, aren't diagnosed. And so it's also kind of that. That's a challenge too. Yeah. I know we're about to go, so I won't get into that. But yeah, it is.
Next time and anytime, really. I've got a pretty wide open calendar, so let me know when you'd like to come back on, and I'll be keeping my ears open.
Thank you so much, Hal. This was so
Yeah.
much. All
Thanks again, Jennifer. Talk to you later.
right. Talk soon. Bye.